On this episode of When You're Smiling, we're focusing in on the January transfer window. Leicester City, despite the need for perhaps season-changing recruitment, have only brought in one player so far in the shape of Ruud Koulibaly for €3 million from Parma. Now, whilst the 25-year-old looks like a good bit of shrewd business, the Foxes sit second bottom in the Premier League, conceding too many goals, now not scoring enough, and with significant injuries throughout the team. There might be an expectation that it could, or should, be a busy few days for the football club. I'm Owynn, joined on the show today by former Leicester City goalkeeper coach Mike Stowell and the Fossways' Iain Wright. Mike, I'll start with you. We are, 23 days into the January transfer window. I wonder how you look at it so far for Leicester.
Well, I always think January transfer window is a last gasp saloon window for many clubs. You're always held to ransom because if you're after players, everybody knows you're desperate for players. They're not going to give you the better players. Anyone who's got the good players, they're going to keep the good players for the push. You're either getting rid of players you don't want or you're selling players that are average players for more money because teams are desperate for new recruitment. And I'm always worried and wary of the January window because you always, as a club, you plan for generally the summer, a good push there. January window is like the only good if you're a Liverpool or you're fighting for the title, you've got some money and you recruit extra firepower or extra players of quality and you're adding to that. I'm afraid at the other end of the table, very rarely does it work. And I don't want to sound doom and gloom about this, but but Leicester City 2 years ago, if you remember, brought in Victor Christiansen, Harry Souttar and Tete, went away to Aston Villa and thought we'd solved the problem with 3 new signings and, we know where that went.
It was quite the performance from Tete on that occasion, Mike, and unfortunately didn't go on to repeat it in any really other game that season. And you see Harry Souttar now out on loan in the Championship and injured as well. And Victor Christiansen only really now beginning to get a run of games in the side this season. I was going to ask you about that January transfer window because it did feel significant at the time for one reason, and then it felt significant at the end of the season for a totally different reason, that it looked like it had worked, and then in the end it hadn't. Is this window more than anything a lottery?
Oh, massively so. And like I say, you haven't been really planning for these signings. You know, I know like you've got to be aware of any potential injuries in your squad and then you have to go and get some very quickly. But generally your chief scouts and all that, you build for the summer where you work with the players throughout the summer and you're building for the next season and all that. January window, it is a lottery. It is panic buys sometimes. It is like January sales is what they say. And like you say, with Victor and Harry and Tete, it was a great performance away at Villa, and you think you've cured it instantly, but it wasn't to be. And I'm going to lie to this, really. You probably the Leicester fans don't want to listen to this, but your back 4 of this season of Christiansen, Fass, Vestergaard and JJ was the back 4 that went down. And now, all right, you've gone up in the Championship, unbelievable, and yeah, great. But they were the lads that you came down with. What do you think's going to change? The manager, is he going to turn these players into different players? You know, that should have been addressed when you went up, not addressed in January now, because who's going to give you a Van Dijk for £5 million? You sold Tom Cannon for 10 million. So what is the purse? Only John Rookin and Top will know the purse. You know, the FFP, we don't know what they said. I mean, I'm assuming that 10 million from Tom Cannon and his wages won't be much, will be given to go on to Ruud to find and strengthen. But that back 4 needs strengthening.
Well, one signing is, as we've mentioned, and you mentioned Tom Cannon there as well. We will talk about him in a second. But Ruud Koulibaly looks like a good bit of business, everything that goes around him, coming into the prime of his career, getting him whilst he was running down his contract at Parma for a good fee that you can amortise over a number of years. It essentially works out when you take the length of his contract at maybe £400,000 a year for him, which for PSR and financial fair play works out pretty well. But it doesn't feel like it's enough, Mike. Would you agree with that?
No, absolutely. Like what I've just said there, you've got 4 of your back 4, 5 with Luke Thomas. That was the 5 that went down, and you're going to need more. You're going to need more, I'm afraid, and that's the brutal reality of it. And your other worry is, and this is a huge problem you will get at this time. Players that are going to come into you, you will either have to be on a release clause because they're going to come in as Premier players. Now, if you were to go down, you've now got a player on a 2-3 year deal on big money. Well, how do you get rid of them and shift them? Or do you have to give them away? Will these players come to a relegation battle? What player are you going to get to come to a relegation battle? Harry Souttar came from Stoke. You know, Tete was a bit of a gamble. Victor Christian come from Denmark. You know, what players are you realistically going to get coming to a relegation battle and scrap? And how much money can you afford to pay them? And if you go down, you remember you're going to continue to pay them.
Iain, from a fan's perspective, where are you on the January transfer window so far?
I'll tell you where I am, Owynn. I'm honestly fed up with coming on the show on January and having the same conversations year after year after year. And it's epically frustrating as a fan, epically frustrating. Because, and look, I take on board everything Mike said there, and, you know, I really respect his refreshing honesty about, you know, how poor that back 4 is. But the way I'm looking at this, Owynn, the same things repeat themselves year after year after year. We react too slowly. You know, as Mike said there, we're deep in a relegation battle. But on the 1st of January, that was 4 games ago. You know, we were a lot more of an attractive proposition 4 games ago. New manager, you know, played well against Man City, picked up a few points in December. We've burnt through them 4 games and lost them all again with that, you know, abysmal defence. And it's epically frustrating because just about every interview you've had with Ruud, Owynn, he's talked about, we've got plans for January. You know, the board's promised for this when we did the interview. This is what we've got planned. And once again, it's just not happened. And, you know, we have made one signing, but I mean, when have you ever heard another Premier League club signing somebody on a Wednesday and then they're not being available to play on the Saturday? It's just ridiculous. I don't know. There's serious problems behind the scenes at Leicester City. You know, Michael probably know a lot more than we do. And I'm sure a lot of it probably can't let on. But it just seems to be, you know, communication channels are just blocked because things just don't go through quick enough. You know, I mean, the Tom Cannon deal's gone through today, great, but we recalled him from his loan 8 days ago. It took 8 days to conclude a deal. You know, and we're in a desperate situation now. You look at what we can do, and I take on board what Mike said. It's not ideal to be doing it now. We blew us, you know, the money back in the summer. But you look at that squad. The defence is desperate. It genuinely wouldn't take that much of a player to improve what we've got. You know, so there surely must be players out there on the continent or wherever that we can loan. You know, maybe, you know, like we've done with Koulibaly, people running the contract down. It really won't take much to improve that team. And you know, you asked me how I feel. I feel so frustrated, Owynn, because even despite all this ridiculous season that we've had, we're still only 2 points from safety. I genuinely don't think it'd take much to push us over that line and get us to safety. But there's just serious problems behind the scenes in that we just cannot react quick enough. And we're running into a position here, and I'll tell you this for nothing. Ruud Van Nistelrooy will walk away. Because we promised him that we're going to make signings and we're 23, 24 days into the transfer window and they've not happened yet. He'll walk away because we're not giving him the support. And like Mike said, who's going to work with that defence? Nobody can.
Hold that thought, Iain, because we will get onto that in a little bit. It was interesting what you said there about Ruud Van Nistelrooy talking through the you know, before the January transfer window started, with all the elements of and all the different questions of what January was going to look like. And I did go back through my posts on X and found this one. This was on the 6th of December. I posted, Ruud Van Nistelrooy says there is no rush to bring in new players in January with his young squad continuing to develop. I asked if there was money to spend. It was a simple answer, yes. And that was all Ruud said to me. I asked him, is there money to spend in January? Have you been reassured that there is money to spend in January? He looked me dead in the eye and just said yes. And at present, with all of that in mind, with all the things that Ruud has talked about in his press conference, and you know, there are numerous ways in which this finger can be pointed in at different people here. But this is, in my view, Iain, and I think you probably agree with me based on the things you said as well, it probably is fair to call this window so far in the first 23 days a failure.
Yeah, it is, Owynn, because the thing is nowadays, as you well know, working in the media, you hear about transfers miles out, don't you? There's chatter and this, you know, you have these accounts and all that sort of thing, you know. There's not even any of that. But we can't be remotely close to sign anybody because there's no chatter. So, but what have we been doing? Why? When, you know, as soon as you put the champagne away on New Year's Eve, why weren't we lining deals up? Why weren't we approaching players? You know, people say, how do you know we weren't doing? Well, we'd have known. It gets out nowadays, doesn't it? You know, all this clandestine, keeping it all secret, that doesn't happen anymore. I just don't know. You know, it's just epically frustrating. And then you see, you know, that deal that's just gone from OH Leuven that's gone to West Ham, the guy that's gone to West Ham, that, you know, if Leuven have got a player, a midfielder that's Premier League standard, why are we spending 25 million on Oliver Skipp? You know, what's going on within the club? That's supposed to be our sister club. You know, we should be training players up with them. They should be selling them. The two teams should be working together. But we've got a Premier League ready player within the King Power umbrella who's going to West Ham. It's just utterly, you know, what is going on behind the scenes with the club? They're either completely and utterly disorganised and incompetent, or there's something deeper going on where we stopped trying and we're now just looking at going into the Championship. It feels to me, you know, I'm flabbergasted by it. I mean, I don't want to come here and criticise the club. I really don't. You know how passionate I am. You know, go home games, go away games. You know, it gives me no pleasure at all to feel like this. But I just feel that we're just being desperately let down, that the club will be very keen soon to be getting season ticket money and all that sort of stuff. But we're just being let down. Where are all the new players?
Mike, where do you stand on Iain's sentiments there?
Yeah, I feel for him and I feel the fans' frustration and listen, I've been in it and right deep inside the club and everything, but believe you me, there are things I can't tell you, but also there's things that we were not privy to as well. And I think there's no transparency, and that goes throughout football. I think fans and people alike would be more open if they came out and said, look, because of FFP, because we almost got punished last year, we cannot run the risk of being that again and getting points deducted if we go back to the Championship and getting more points. So if they came up with a stance and said, we can't buy, or we've got only this amount, then you come together. You might say, right, okay, then we roll our sleeves up. What else can we do then? But the non-communication, the silence is deafening. The silence, you know, because it's like, have you got money then? Well, if you've promised Ruud, what have you promised him? Ruud can't tell you that because he's not going to come out and say, oh, well, this and that, because, you know, he's the manager of the club and rightly so. And I don't think he'll walk, but he'll be frustrated. But it might be a simple thing like this, and I'm not being like sitting on the fence here, or I mean, it might be they've gone for 2 or 3 targets and they've been brainwashed by other clubs and took away, and the deal might have been there and pulled away. I know for a fact that's happened before. I know for a fact with Brendan it's been happened before, and it's frustrating. And you've only got this tight window to operate in, and then all of a sudden, this one player that was third on your list becomes first on your list. And what he was like maybe a 2 or 3 million is suddenly become a 12 million because everybody knows that that's all you can go for now. And he might push him out the window. There's all these factors behind the scenes. I'm not making excuses. Without them coming out and saying, I don't know. But I always feel like, obviously, they've got to keep certain things private and secret until it happens. But please give the fans something to, to believe in and understand of what's going on.
When you're smiling, a Leicester City podcast with Owynn Palmer-Atkin.
You mentioned PSR there, Mike, and after Leicester City were found compliant with the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules recently, there were questions asked and there were thoughts pondered on this show and on other fan podcasts and in and around the Leicester City sphere about whether the all clear from that might mean a surge in activity in the transfer market. So I put that question to Sheffield Hallam University's football finance expert, Dr. Dan Plumley.
Yeah, I think it can. And you know, again, the club will know that internally, of course. This data was submitted to the Premier League, of course, until the verdict's delivered. You never quite know, but the club have been bullish and confident. And that now is, you know, turns out to be the verdict that we've got. And then that does mean you can shift your plans and accordingly, because you're kind of free of that particular issue that might have caused a particular headache, particularly in the January transfer window. And I think there's a couple of things, again, that we need to tag on to that, as you say. One is looking forward into the summer, but also the current situation and Premier League status come May will also dictate that level of transfer activity in the summer to a degree, because it is ultimately beneficial for Leicester City to be a Premier League football club, given the TV money that we know comes with it. So that's a kind of an absolute must, I guess, for the club if they want to, you know, push on, retain the status in the Premier League and then continue to grow back from there. The league position is going to be important within that. And then when you look at the new set of regulations, they will look very different. So at the minute, what's been kind of out there in terms of what they will look like is that the clubs are going to be limited to spending 85% of revenue on squad-related costs. That aligns with UEFA's framework, and that's cost in terms of wages, amortisation, transfer fees, agents' fees. It's now a catch-all figure that the authorities will look at. But those clubs outside of Europe, where UEFA are setting that bar at 70%, the Premier League will fall in line with that for clubs in UEFA competitions. But for other clubs, that limit is perceived to be up to 85% of revenue. So that's at the minute what Leicester will be looking at in that transition period of old regs to new regs. And that number does change a lot versus your old kind of PSR calculations. Of course, you still need to be mindful of it in terms of your spending, because you have to fall in line with that. But it will shift transfer plans for all clubs. And actually, you know, we're kind of talking in the past tense there, but it already is affecting transfer plans, because, of course, the clubs are well in the thick of planning towards these new regulations that they expect to see coming. So, yeah, I think this verdict today probably does give Leicester the scope to perhaps press forward with some plans now that maybe, you know, they would have had to put on hold had there been, you know, a decision to punish them.
Dr. Dan Plumley there from Sheffield Hallam University. You can find more of that chat on the When You're Smiling podcast as we reacted to the fact that Leicester City and all of the other 19 Premier League clubs had been found compliant with the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules. Mike, though, I mean, you've been in and around the club as a coach, and and I know people might talk about PSR and those kind of things, and managers will say it doesn't seep into the dressing room, but I can't help but not believe that. And I just wonder from a coach's perspective, from players' perspectives, whether when that kind of that ruling comes through and it is then official, whether you would have expected more business to have been conducted by now because of that.
Yeah, you know, this noise is around the dressing room all the time and around the coaches. And believe you me, players will want help. They'll understand it's tough at the minute. And though if somebody comes in their position, they're not going to say, "Oh, right, is he taking his position?" They need a lift. This squad needs a lift. They need a fresh influx of players. The staff wouldn't want them to come in as well and to help, to give you more options, more firepower, more armoury of whatsoever. So the players will be talking and they'll be wanting this. And day by day, the lack of noise and the lack of rumours and what's going on, it is a sinking feeling sometimes, you know. And going back on Iain's about with the loans, you can get some loans from abroad, but obviously Odsonne Edouard's not worked can they get him out of the building so you can get one more from maybe a loan from the Premier? The loans are more productive, believe you me, because from what happens at the end of the season, then they're not yours. They can go back to the parent club, or you can just release them, and they're not a burden financially. And the big point is here, what the man was saying about the finances. Next season, sponsor money is almost doubled in that Premier. It is a massive season to stay in the Premier. If ever you need to stay in this Premier, it's from this season. And Leicester are in a 4-team league for me. 2 out of 4 go down. So it's not going to be massive numbers, like Iain said, like Iain adhered to before. He's right. It's being in there. Don't think about anywhere else. It's those 4 teams being better than Everton, being better than Wolves, and being better than Ipswich. That's all they've got to do, being better than 2 of those teams. And if it has to be you work with what your team and you bring one more player in or one, I'll ask Iain the question. If you had only 1 or 2 players you could bring in, which positions would you strengthen?
It'd have to be a centre-back, Mike, because, like you've alluded to, and, we all know that the defence just isn't good enough, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. So, that centre-back position, all season we've just shipped goals, and we've not been able to get a good combination. For some reason, Akoli's been dropped out of the equation. I don't understand that either, that, why either A, he's not in the team, or B, why we're trying to move him on. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me at all, especially with the sort of PSR, considerations that if we end up selling him for less than what we bought him for, it's an absolute disaster on the balance sheet. It'll just write off anything that we did with Tom Cannon. So, Owynn, from when we spoke before, I understand the PSR situation. You're still, even now, even after all this time, you get fans online, can't so-and-so take us over, and they'll pump money in, and all them days are long gone. I understand that we can't throw money at it, and I get it, but the thing that annoys me and frustrates me, the club isn't, some of the things that they've done on PSR conscious. We've given Yannick Vestergaard a 3-year contract. It was ridiculous. We've brought in Bobby DeCorba-Reid on a 3-year contract. These people are just going to drain money out of the club. We would have been, like Mike said there, we would have been much better going down the route of, look, we're tight on PSR, we're going to sign young players, we're going to develop people out of the academy. We need your support to get behind these players, and we're going to go down this route. But we've just, we've had money in the summer and we've completely wasted it. 25 million on Oliver Skipp, bonkers. So there is only so much sympathy you can have for this board when we continually make the same mistakes with signing players and dishing out contracts. And we're back in exactly the same position that we were in 2 years ago. But sorry, that's a long answer. But for goodness sake, I'd keep Akoli and get another centre back. That's where I would go.
Because Ruud Van Nistelrooy has spoken, as we've already talked about. The fact that he believes that there is money to spend. It was part of the conversations when he was negotiating with Leicester in December, and then 20 odd days into a 34-day transfer window, there is still only 1 player through the door, and one of them leaving. And actually, I think a lot of Leicester fans and Iain, every player that's not in a team that's struggling becomes better, and it's kind of like one of the old cliches of football. But Tom Cannon, I don't think he really ever got the opportunity to show what he was truly capable of. We're talking about a guy here who only 18 months ago, maybe less, was the heir to Jamie Vardy's throne. The guy that Enzo Maresca was saying that even though he had a fracture in his back, the club still signed him because they knew how big of a prospect he is. And today he departs for Sheffield United for a fee that we understand to be £10 million plus around £3 million of add-ons as well. He signed a 4-year deal with Sheffield United with the option for an extra year. They clearly see the potential in Tom Cannon as well. And Iain, from your perspective, when you see a player like him leaving the club, especially where Leicester City are at this moment, and they're struggling at the top end of the pitch, Odsonne Edouard seems missing in action, Daka struggling for form, Jamie Vardy is 38 years old, and yes, whilst he's the GOAT, can't be expected to do it week in, week out without support. It seems a no-brainer to bring Tom Cannon back in and give him maybe the opportunity.
Absolutely, Owynn. I mean, given my
Sorry,
answer.
there isn't a question there, really, is there? Yeah. I apologise.
No. I mean, the thing is with this Cannon deal that. Look, I've criticised people who criticised the club in the past for not reacting quickly enough in the transfer market. There's been times in the past where, Wilfred Ndidi might have fetched 40, 50 million pounds, whereas we got to last summer and we couldn't even give him away for free. So there has been inertia in the past in the transfer market. So, if the club have taken the view that they think Cannon's not good enough for what we need, then we've took that cash and done it. However, if we do go down next summer, you'll have me on this show and you'll say, what do we need, Iain, for the next season in the Championship? And I'm going to go, well, we need a player. We need a striker like Tom Cannon. And you just think with him being a young player, he's not going to lose any value in the next few months. He was scoring goals at Stoke. His value is only ever going to go up, if anything. But, if it does free up a little bit of cash to try and keep us in the league, then let's hope so. But like I said, I would rather have 10 Tom Cannons than one Bobby de Corba-Reid. I mean, you don't get rid of your young players like that. You develop them and get even more from them and get more out of them. But, once again, we've backed ourselves into a corner, haven't we? If you look across our squad, I'm sure Michael will agree that you look across our squad, Owynn, there's probably only a handful of players, maybe as few as 6 or 7, that you could actually sell for a transfer fee. Out of a squad of 25 players, I reckon 15, maybe even 20 of them would only leave this club on a free. And that, Tom Cannon's one of the very, very few within that squad. Fatawu being another one who's injured, that we could actually sell for a fee. And that in itself just is in a nutshell of the terrible way that the club and the squad has been run over the last few years. The squad is not a patch on what it was and it's disintegrated.
Let's talk about Ruud Van Nistelrooy. All throughout the beginning of December, all the way through to where we are now, he's talked about the fact that he wants new signings through the door. He's made the admission that this squad needs new signings through the door if they are going to stay in the Premier League. Mike, he sounds like a manager who thought he was getting reinforcements. He has sounded like a manager who still thinks that he's getting reinforcements, but Ruud Van Nistelrooy has prior for making his feelings known when he doesn't feel supported. He left PSV Eindhoven with a game to go because he didn't feel like he was getting the backing from the board. Do you envisage a point this season where that could happen again from Ruud Van Nistelrooy? Or is there a difference here because this is a Premier League job?
It's a good question. It's a good question. And like we're going to surmise and guess and mind read. Ruud's the own man who can dictate that. You see, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes here for this. Now, he might have been promised a certain amount. For me, going back with the Tom Cannon deal, there's only one reason you sell Tom Cannon. If £10 million, you are getting that £10 million back to spend for a player, or it's going to pay your debt off. To stop you getting a fine. So there's no other reason to be selling Tom Cannon. You're not recalling him and selling him. So why would you do that? It's that £10 million must be going back into the pot and for a player. So it must be coming in. It must be. I can't, if it doesn't now, I mean, what other reason have you done it for? And like Iain said, you might as well keep him either for the future or use him. Why not use him? Because Edouard's surplus to requirements. Patson Daka's totally not going to be that man for you. And like you said, learned about with Vards, Vards can't do it all on his own. Back to your question, I'm sorry for ducking on that. I can't answer that with Ruud. You just don't know what's in his mind. If he's done it once before, yeah, he could do it again. Does he have any more loyalty to Leicester City? Probably not. Even because he said himself after 5 games at Man United, he couldn't believe the offers he was getting. I mean, they were all banging on the door, wanting him. He's probably thought, well, Leicester City, yes, fantastic facility, great club, why not? And then if he's been promised and it's just fallen away and not been there, why not? He won't be short of another offer, I'm sure. If he's a man of his principle and he was being promised, then he might just do that. But these are all, again, we're sort of guessing in this way, I'm afraid, Owynn. You don't know what really, even being in there, sometimes we didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. But I don't want all this to sound, and I can see frustration here, and I can see all the Leicester's frustration. I have so many good people out there that I've got great memories from, that are talking to me, and I feel the pain. But all I will say, on a positive side, if it doesn't go the way you want the transfer window, Everton aren't going to be buying anyone. Ipswich will not be buying anyone. Wolves won't be buying anyone. They have history. It just becomes can we beat you of what you've got? You beat Ipswich to the title last season. Wolves are in 3-4, and Everton's been there for the last 3-4 years and could drop out the window, because they always do. Always one club does or drops down. So, or even Spurs. Like, let's not discount them, by the way. I know I can see Owynn having a little chuckle there, but you got two. Basically, we talk about 6-pointers. I don't like that word, but Everton and Spurs in your next 2 games. Listen, if it doesn't transpire with the transfer window, you still got to knuckle down, get behind them, and support Ruud. Let's hopefully Ruud has a couple of tricks up his sleeve and finds something else out of this squad.
Iain, as a fan, do you have the concern around Ruud Van Nistelrooy doing something similar to what happened at PSV Eindhoven? Because it is something that has been spoken about, hinted at by some national outlets today. I mean, in my mind, the fact we're discussing this feels incredible, that a manager potentially isn't getting the support he was promised after 10 games and into his first transfer window. But I wonder whether you have that concern.
Yeah, I absolutely do. Yeah, I said to you, Owynn, that Ruud was the one I wanted. I'm a massive advocate of Ruud. Now, look, I know we haven't got the results and things that we needed, but I think that he has implemented some good things, and there have been times when we have looked a lot more organised and we have been playing better. But whatever he does with that team is going to be constantly undermined by the fact that defenders can't defend. So I am genuinely worried that he will walk away, because, he's a wealthy guy. He doesn't need the cash. And his reputation will be in tatters if we end up going down on 20 points, which is what it's maybe looking like at the moment. So if we don't get some players in, I can see him walking away. And, I don't think anyone could blame him. I mean, look, the thing is, Owynn, it's been a really negative day in call, and a lot of people have talked about entitled fans. It's not about that. It's about caring for your club and about wanting the best. That I've been on here lots of times. I love Top. I love everything that Top's done for us. I love what the family's done for us. We'll all be eternally grateful for what's happened in the past. But at the minute, the club is dysfunctional. There's things going on that just don't make any sense. And we're back where we were 2 years ago, with a lot of the same squad having the same conversations, stuck in this rut of not being able to get players through the door and not being able to get anybody out of the door either. So, it's just so frustrating. But we're only 2 points away, fluke a win at Spurs and we can suddenly be looking a bit more positive. But, those 2 games last week, they were real kickers. You felt that was a big opportunity missed.
Yeah, it's... The problem around this situation is that Ruud's history, combined with the comments of previous managers, from what we know and what they've told us, doesn't necessarily make for good maths, does it? Brendan Rodgers was pretty critical of the hierarchy in quite a thinly veiled way of the football club when he returned ahead of the 2022-2023 season to be told that deals that he arranged were now not to be sanctioned. Enzo Maresca similarly was vocal about being told just 2 weeks before the January transfer window that there were no funds to spend. Steve Cooper also made comments and hinted at his experience of maybe not getting exactly what was promised. Mike, this feels like it is becoming too much maybe of a trend and maybe an image problem for Leicester City with managers, because one manager out of what we're talking about 4 managers here. 1 manager out of 4, maybe 2 managers out of 4 could be forgiven. But when you have consistently manager after manager after manager after manager talking about these things, it does look like a problem.
Well, they say there's no smoke without fire, but you'd put me in a bit of an awkward position.
Sorry,
if you wanted me to say, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to stay quiet on that one. What I will say is, if Ruud does walk or does go, you have such a problem then, because if you look at historically, you go anybody that's in the relegation zone after February, that changes the manager, has never survived. Because you're going into a club where you're almost at rock bottom with a change, and you might get that little bounce effect for 1 or 2 games, but it's not enough time to do that. You can't change players. You can't bring anyone in. What are you going to do to change that scenario? So for me, you hope that Ruud stays, even if he doesn't get what he wants. You need to keep him happy in some sort, or he might be aware of what's going on. Again, we see we're guessing a little bit here. Is there money behind the scenes? Are they trying super hard to get these players, and the players don't want to come? Has anybody thought about that sort of situation? Again, I allure to, I think the fans would be happier, and in life is this general, be transparent. We've tried to get him. He wants 100 grand a week, and we can only give him 60. He will not come to us. Okay, fine. That's it. We accept that. We can't go in for this player because we haven't got this money. Okay, fine. Let's go with what done. The silence kills everybody because everybody assumes the worst. It might be, but you don't take that out the equation. Then be honest with everybody and tell you what's going on, and then it might be right. Okay, fans, nothing's coming in. This group of players, you support them as best as you can, and you get them over the line, and then maybe Summit might have to after in the summer. But I think, I don't know, I can't speak for Iain or the rest of the fans, but I think that's probably what most of them would want to hear.
Mike, I know that was a difficult question for you to answer, so I'm going to swing it and play the 5-yard hospital pass on the edge of the area to Iain, who I can imagine is actually quite happy to answer this kind of question. Just feel, maybe just going back to what I asked Mike there, Iain, when you talk about the managers and the things that they've said when you join up the dots, that this looks like an issue.
It is an issue. It is an issue, Owynn. And it's like Mike said there, it's so avoidable. We hear nothing, do we? And that that isn't a problem when you're winning. But when you're not winning, if you're not saying anything, people will fill that void with information. And this is the thing, that there might be stuff going on in the background, but it doesn't feel like that. People get wind of transfers, and that there's a cottage industry on following transfers and stuff. If we were talking to people, I'm sure that we'd hear whispers and that sort of thing. And it is a worry that, like I said, manager after manager has been in a position whereby they don't feel that they've been told the truth, and it's very, very difficult. And the club don't come out and contradict that, do they? They don't come out and say, well, we could have done this, we never said that, we never promised this. There's just, there's just nothing, there's nothing there. And it puts us in this position where we're stuck in the drop zone and staring down the barrel at relegation once again.
Well, we've been getting your thoughts on the January transfer window on our WhatsApp voice notes.
Hey guys, Becky here. I think it's desperation stations for Leicester in the window right now. Realistically, we probably needed 3, 4, 5 players this window with the injuries to the big players that we do, if we have any small chance of staying up this season. But realistically, I think we'll be very lucky to see even one more come through the door. And unfortunately, I think if we do, it'll probably still be quite uninspiring. We don't have much of a good record of late January signings. So hopefully I'm wrong. We could do with sorting out many positions. I think right wing would give us better balance attacking wise, but we've conceded so many goals. The defence you'd expect to be the priority. I don't know who I'd bring in, but it seems like the club don't know either. So fingers crossed we can get someone in that gives us any kind of hope.
Good evening, Owynn. My thoughts on the transfer window? Every transfer window in January is like this for Leicester City. This is not the time to be buying players. They're either going to be over expensive or they're going to be very hesitant to join a team that looks like it's about to drop out of the Premier League. I'm sure no professional footballer, apart from somebody from our academy, wakes up and thinks, my dream is to play for Leicester City. So the negotiations and deals will take longer, be tougher. Players will look at every other opportunity available to them before coming to Leicester City. City. On the manager, did he get told? Didn't he get told? Palaver. He would have got told. He would have got told what he needed to know to take the job. And if he didn't find it out himself, then that's his problem. As for getting players in, maybe if he'd have won one of the last 7 games, we would be in a better position to get players in because we would have won something. Now, all they can see is a club in free fall, I'm afraid. But fingers crossed, a few things get sorted out and we stay up.
Hi Owen, this is the Wigston Fox. So the transfer window, waste of time really, isn't it? We're never going to get a decent deal through. I think people saying that people don't want to come to Leicester, I mean, it doesn't seem to hinder Ipswich, who constantly bring players in on loan. So I think we're either too slow or we can't even afford loans. But I think the bigger picture for me is that I don't know what Ruud was promised, but he certainly wouldn't have thought he'd been promised this. So I'd be thinking we're more likely to see Ruud walk than somebody else walk in. Would that be a bad thing? Who knows? Dice is available, but I think even this squad of players might be just a bridge too far for even the Ginger Mourinho. I'm not holding out any hopes, really, for the transfer window. In fact, I'm struggling to hold out any hopes for the rest of the season. There's an air of inevitability about what's going down at the club, and we'll hear it all again at the end of the season, that there will be a root and branch investigation, blah, 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 and we'll probably kick off next season with the same back four. Anyway, that's all I can say about it.
That's all for now on When You're Smiling. We'll be back on Friday with all the headlines from Ruud Van Nistelrooy's pre-match press conference ahead of that game with Spurs on Sunday, as the Foxes look to end this losing streak in the Premier League and pick up their first points of 2025.